Okay, so I just saw a video by Wongel Zelalem about how Saudi Arabian guards basically unalived like 600 Ethiopian migrants, trying to keep them out of Saudi Arabia. Um, now, how can I say this? I don't actually know how I feel about this. Obviously, I feel sad that people are being murdered, but I also feel a little bit ashamed that more more Ethiopian people aren't taking autonomy for, or not taking autonomy, but why there aren't more Ethiopian people who are doing more to like make the lives of Ethiopians in Ethiopia better so that people won't have to flee. Now, I definitely understand some. I understand some of the economic challenges that are facing that region of the world. It's the heat, it's the poverty, it's the lack of healthcare, the lack of food, just really lack of everything, right? And so, um, it's something I've been like slowly researching, but I would just make my research process maybe a little bit more open, so that you guys can understand a little bit more about the reasons that I plan to like move there next year and just probably spend my life trying to improve the situation. So I read this a couple of weeks ago by the Associated Press. So the World Food Program slowly resumes food aid to Ethiopia after months of suspension and criticism. So there's a picture of an Ethiopian woman who scoops up portions of wheat to be allocated to each waiting family after it was distributed by the Relief Society of Tigray in the town of Agula in the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia on May 8th, 2021. The United Nations World Food Program is slowly resuming food aid to Ethiopia, the agency said on Monday, August 7th, 2023, nearly 5 months after taking the extraordinary measure of suspending aid to millions of people after the discovery of a massive scheme to steal donated grain. I don't actually know why the government is stealing grain or why people are stealing grain. I don't understand that. I know there's a lot of corruption all over Africa, and I don't understand why it does feel like the corruption has gotten to a point where they would rather have all of their own people die. That's very strange. I do feel like a very similar thing though is also happening in America, where like lots of Americans are actually dying with the policies that are in place right now. So I'm not sure who they want to survive, but whatever. Okay, so in Nairobi, Kenya, the Associated Press, that's where this was written, I suppose. The United Nations World Food Program is slowly resuming food aid to Ethiopia, nearly 5 months after taking the extraordinary measure of suspending aid to millions of people after the discovery of a massive scheme to steal donated grain. The World Food Program said it's testing a small scale distribution in some areas, but acknowledges that the government still plays a role in the process. Critics of the aid suspension, including aid groups and health workers, have called it immoral and alleged that hundreds of people have died of hunger. There's a lot more than hundreds of people who died of hunger. The United States, however, says its own suspension of food aid to the East African country will continue while it negotiates with Ethiopia's government for reforms of a system long controlled by local authorities. The pause has affected 20 million Ethiopians, one sixth of the population, plus 800,000 refugees. That's a lot of people. Um, in a written response Monday evening to questions, the World Food Program told the Associated Press that the agency has started distributing wheat to around 100,000 people in the four districts of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region on July 31st as it tests enhanced controls and measures for delivering food assistance. Tigray is recovering from a 2 year conflict with Ethiopian forces that ended in November. The World Food Program's new measures include digitally registering beneficiaries, adding markings to grain sacks, feedback hotlines, and more training for aid partners. The agency hopes to roll out its new distribution center to other parts of Ethiopia as soon as possible. the World Food Program said, adding that it's confident the measures will help to ensure food reaches the people who need it most. The World Food Program first halted food deliveries to Tigray in March after discovering the theft of grain. In a single Tigray town, enough stolen food aid to feed 134,000 people for a month was found instead for sale in markets still marked with the U.S. flag. That's pretty bad. The suspension was extended to all of Ethiopia in June. The U.S., the largest humanitarian donor to both Ethiopia and the World Food Program, also paused food aid. U.S. officials have said they believe the theft could be the largest ever diversion of donated food. Aid workers have told the Associated Press that Ethiopian officials were deeply involved. That's pretty bad. Ethiopia's government dismissed as harmful propaganda the suggestion that it bears primary responsibility and agreed to a joint investigation. Donors Donors have recommended completely removing Ethiopia's government from the aid system. I think that's a good idea at this point. But the World Food Program works in Ethiopia at the request of the government and works closely with the government of Ethiopia at all levels, the UN agency said. The UN Agency for International Development told the Associated Press in a written response to questions that the resumption of the World Food Program aid is not funded by the U.S., which continues its suspension. It noted the World Food Program is funded by the World Bank. We are committed to resuming food assistance as quickly as possible once we can be confident our assistance is reaching the most vulnerable that it is intended for, U.S. aid said, adding that the Secretary of State Antony Blinken has spoken with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to drive progress on these issues. Some humanitarian groups and Ethiopian religious leaders have joined the calls to resume food aid distribution as soon as possible. People are starving to death. In recent weeks, hunger has killed hundreds of people in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region as a result of food shortage. This is neither humane nor moral. Caritas International's Secretary General Alistar Dutton said in a statement in July. The U.S. has told the Associated Press it was horrified by reports of hunger. Addressing criticism, U.S. Aid Administrator Samantha Power said last month that suspending food assistance at a time of such vulnerability is absolutely wrenching, that none of us would ever wish to be a part of or had anything to do with, but she added that one could have no confidence that the food we're bringing to Ethiopia, that U.S. taxpayers are paying for, was actually reaching this vulnerable people. Ethiopian authorities were investigating, she said, and there's criminal liability and accountability, for any officials who are involved. Yeah, that's true. The implications for the U.S. are global, proving it can detect and stop the theft of aid paid for by U.S. taxpayers is vital at a time when the Biden administration is fighting to maintain public support for aid to corruption-plagued Ukraine. Power said she knew people were looking for an exact date the food aid would resume, but we have come a very long way in a short period of time, and our heartfelt ambition, is to restart food assistance as soon as possible. So this writer is Ellen Nickmeyer in Washington, and she writes for the Associated Press. This is interesting.